Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Rylands. I'm Vice President of Sales Engineering at CoreStack. The goal of this video is to provide a high-level introductory demo of the CoreStack platform. This is a first in a series of videos. In follow-up videos, we will dive deeper into the technology and the benefits of CoreStack. However, if you have any specific questions or want a demo of CoreStack, please contact us by going to our website, corestack.io, and selecting the Contact Us or Request a Demo button, or email us at sales@corestack.io. Now, before jumping into the demo, I want to spend just a few minutes providing some context. So what is CoreStack? CoreStack is a cloud management and service governance platform. Well, what does that mean? Well, if we look at the evolution of IT, there's no doubt that the adoption of cloud has completely revolutionized the way that enterprises innovate and deliver services to their users and customers. This in turn means that responsibilities around security, reliability, privacy, overall management and control also shift from the institution or enterprise onto the service provider. That's a pretty big transition. And when we think about DevOps, the culture, the pressure to adopt agile IT methodologies, the continued proliferation of services and data, the growth of the Internet of Things, the move from containerization, serverless, to edge computing, all of this has led to massive organizational changes in technology, people, processes, and policies. Now, this is some of what is driving many institutions and enterprises to ask questions like, what applications are services are being used in our ecosystem? Who owns and manages these resources? Are they being patched regularly? Do we have consistency throughout our dev to QA to pre-prod to production? What about cost? Are there ways to optimize? What is the end user's experience? Whether that's an end user or customer, is there a way to set metrics or measure that experience? Can we automate that process? Is there ways to increase productivity or to optimize? There's this notion that, well, we'll just overbuild everything. Let's throw resources at it. But is that the right thing to do? Does that solve our goals and initiatives? Are our contributors following the deployment process and guidelines that we as an enterprise have put in place? Now, most companies will define resource tagging structures to track cost, ownership, whether the resource is production or not. Now, are those processes and procedures being followed? If so, how do we report on it? How do we enforce that? What about security, regulatory compliance? Can we pull reports when for audits? As an example, if you're in healthcare or retail, and you need to adhere to regulatory compliance like HIPAA or PCI. It's designed to protect people's personal information. In those cases, all data that is PPI needs to be flagged, tracked. Where is it going? Who has access to it? And the data needs to be encrypted at rest and also in transit. So that brings up concerns. Well, if audited, how do we pull reports? What do we do? Another area, a point of contention is, do we have a competitive advantage? So if every customer, whether you're small or large, has access to the same environments, the same services as a business, what does that mean for my competitive advantage? If a new service becomes available, that will give me a competitive edge, but it's offered by a different cloud provider than who we're using, what do we do? Do we wait for it? If not, how do we onboard that new service? How long will that take? Do we need to hire new people with new skill sets? Which of these services and data is critical to my business? How do we know what is production, staging, development? Do we treat all those resources the same? Do we have a backup and recovery plan? Do we need to provide the same SLAs to production as we do to development and test? Is that process regularly tested? Do we verify the outcome during an outage? So all of these, or some of these, are the questions that are driving the conversation and the need for governance. Now, there's many detailed definitions for governance. However, at the simplest form, it's to ensure that we are doing the right things, that we are doing them the right way, and that we're verifying the outcome. The important thing, though, is the goal of governance should be around governing the use, not blocking it. Its focus should be about mitigating the risks versus the rewards. Now, many people view governance as just putting checks and balances in place, which introduce roadblocks to agility and speed to innovation, but that shouldn't be the case. A good governance framework tied with the right tooling should not only remove the roadblocks, but should help increase speed to innovation. So this is where CoreStack comes in. CoreStack is a cloud management and service governance platform. It's been architected to help organizations leverage the benefits of cloud at scale while removing complexities, improving efficiencies, and most importantly, minimizing risk. So what does it do? Well, if we look at this graphic, the outside ring is the governance wheel depicts the services and functions that are required to provide governance to your compute and cloud infrastructure. Now, there are many tools in the market to help with many individual functions, but if you take a step back and look at providing governance to the complete life cycle, it can be pretty overwhelming and chaotic. Now, to overcome that chaos, at CoreStack, we've developed a solution or framework that we call Cloud as Code. It's represented here by the red ring. This Cloud as Code model consolidates all aspects of IT lifecycle management into a modularized framework, which can then be used to provide governance across private data center infrastructure, private cloud, public, hybrid, multi-cloud environments. Now, the four key pillars of that framework are what we call the 4 C's of cloud governance: cloud operations, compliance, cost analytics, and consumption. Well, we'll go through that in detail, but with this framework in mind, let's go ahead and jump into the platform. So first I'm going to log in as an administrator. Now the first thing you'll notice in our dashboard, as well as our user experience, it follows our Cloud as Code framework. So we have 4 main dashboards that follow the 4 C's of cloud governance: cloud ops, compliance, cost analytics, and consumption. Now before we start looking at each one of these dashboards and the insights we can gather, I first want to show you how easy it is to add a new cloud subscription. Now in this particular environment, I've provisioned 2 AWS subscriptions, 2 Azure subscriptions, and I also have CoreStack managing and governing my virtualization environment. So for this demo, I'm going to walk you through the onboarding process of adding an Azure subscription. Now, first thing is we need access to the environment in order to gather data. Next, we're going to define what sort of environment it is and what the scope of that environment is. Do I want every user in all of my tenants to be able to access this subscription? Do I want to lock it down to users inside just this particular tenant, or do I want to make it private? I'm the only one that's allowed, or this user is the only one that's allowed to access this environment. As soon as we define that, next we go into defining our overall governance framework. Now, the first thing we need to do is define which services and products you want CoreStack to manage and govern. So this is where you can look through from virtual machines, the scale sets, containers, storage, network, databases, anything that's available, or any service available in this case through Azure. Next, we're going to define our governance framework. So the first dashboard here, the first configuration has to do with cloud operations. So here I've defined a threshold that says any resource for this subscription in this environment that has a CPU utilization of 85% or more during a 5-minute window, I want to be alerted, and then I'll go take action. Next, I'm going to define what sort of activity notification, tracking, logging I want CoreStack to do. So here, this is a development environment, so I've set it up pretty straightforward. Any updates, deletes, starts, stops to my virtual machine, I want to make sure that I'm alerted and that's logged appropriately. Now, all the options here available will depend on the service provider and which options they have available in their API as well as their services. The next area is around defining the governance rules or the compliance rules. So here for this particular account, I've said that I want all my users to have 3 tags for every resource: environment, application owner, and cost center. But I'm putting a rule in place that makes sure that they at least always have environment and cost center. I want to be able to tell what sort of environment this resource is associated to, if it's production or development or staging, QA. I also want to be able to bill accordingly. So I need to know what cost center department ID this resource is associated with. Next, we're going to define the actual rules and policies. Now, these are there's different categories in here, and there's hundreds of different policies available. I'm just going to show you just a few here that I have provisioned. So the first, this is a development environment. I don't have it selected because I don't have any regulatory compliance against this environment. But here I could select a policy to say, I want to make sure that all storage is encrypted at rest, and I want to make sure it's encrypted in transit. Here I've defined a policy that notifies me anytime someone deploys a resource that is not tagged at all. I have a security policy in here that says any resource that has 0.SSH and RDP access open, I want to be alerted. This is a development environment. I do not want anyone in the world having access to my development environment. From a cost optimization standpoint, I have a policy here that is looking for unattached storage disks. So that would be a disk that's not being used, it's unattached. I'm paying for it, so why don't I automatically have CoreStack go out there and clean those things up, or at least alert me in the dashboard, alert me through email so I can go take action. And here I'm looking for long-running instances. Again, it's a development environment. The resource is very dynamic, so the resources should be in and out. I've set that window up to be 30 days. So any resource that's running over 30 days, I'm going to be alerted. Now, obviously, again, there's hundreds of different policies available. These are kind of just some of the most common ones. Next, we can define resource locks for a specific resource group, define our security settings, define auto shutdown and backup schedules and policies, um, define our self-service catalog. So here I've defined which operating systems I want my users, developers to be able to order for operating system version control. I've defined what resource group, and what region or location I want those resources deployed in. And I've also defined which compute sizes they should be able to use. Again, you could have all the options or lock it down to 1 or 2 options depending on what you want to make available to your users in the self-service portal. The fourth area is around cost. If we have it selected to auto-calculate, CoreStack's going to auto-calculate via historical data and predict and forecast where your budget for this cloud subscription will end up. If you set it to user defined, then you can manually define thresholds. And when users try to spin up resources, it will alert them when it's predicting that they're going to go over the budget. So as soon as I hit select, CoreStack actually does a full discovery of that environment and then starts persisting that data in the dashboard. So now let's take a look at the CloudOps dashboard. What we're looking at here is the CloudOps dashboard. Now the CloudOps framework is actually broken into 2 pages or segments. Cloud operations, so monitoring, alerting, and logging, and then inventory, asset tracking, um, day-to-day operations and management. So here in the Cloud Ops dashboard, from an insight standpoint, if I click on activity logging, I can look at what is happening in this environment. I can see I have quite a few different activities. I can also search through these. So if I wanted to look at console logins activities, I can see that users have logged into different environments. I can look for backups, shutdowns, starts, stops, run instance commands, anything that I had set up when onboarding this subscription. The threshold details is alerting me to a resource that is violating one of those thresholds that I set up. So here I can see that this VM named Inventory VM has a CPU utilization of 97.5%, which is violating my 85% threshold that I set up during the onboarding process. So I can analyze that data here. CoreStack's going to take that historical data and as well as going to make forecast or predictions on where that resource is going to end up. And then it's constantly going back and checking the accuracy of that forecast. So the more time that we have, the more metadata we have available for that resource, the more accurate the forecast and the predictions will be. So here I can analyze the data as well as analyze where this resource on an average is going to end up. So from here, I can start making predictions on what I need to do to resolve this. Most likely in this particular instance, users of this application, because of the high CPU utilization, are probably having a poor experience. Now, usually you probably wouldn't go change or add additional resources live unless it was a development environment. So, but for demo purposes, I'm just going to run this right now. So first, let's look at that resource. If I come in here to the Azure portal, I can see that this resource is a standard DS1 V2, which is one virtual CPU and 3.5 gigs of memory. I also notice here, right, the CPU average is matching the few stress tests I did before this demo. And so from here, let's say, let's go ahead and add additional resources to this environment. So I'm going to hit resize. Now, in a real world environment, I would probably schedule this to be changed in a maintenance window. But for demo purposes, let's go ahead and change it now. So here are the four available VM sizes that I have locked down this user and this subscription to. So for this particular demo, let's go ahead and we'll change it to a standard B2MS, which is going to double the amount of resources available for that workload. So I'm going to hit run now. That's going to run a template to go out there and change the VM size. So if we come over here and I hit refresh, it's now changed that resource. It's doubled it to 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gigs of memory. Most likely in this instance, the threshold will drop. As soon as that threshold drops below my 85% CPU utilization threshold, it will be removed here from the threshold alert. If it continues to violate the threshold or go over that threshold, then I could actually go back in and add more resources as necessary. So the second area around from a cloud operations and cloud management is inventory. So we've done the discovery of those cloud subscriptions, and then we persist all that data here in our inventory dashboard. So here I can see any service that's been provisioned is going to show up here in the dashboard. So I can look at those 4 virtual machines that we saw in that Azure subscription here. I can look at the sizes, the names, the details. I can look at the account details here. It's going to show me who the owner is, who created this resource, which account it's in. Same thing from an AWS side. So this gives you an opportunity to manage all your infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, all your infrastructure from a single place, day-to-day management. And we could do activities, so I could start and stop any action that's available or any template I have in my template marketplace can be mapped to an action, and we can automate that process, that management process. So it's a way to automate kind of day-to-day activities, as well as to be able to have overall visibility and insight for your complete ecosystem. The next dashboard is our compliance dashboard. Now this isn't regulatory compliance necessarily, although that's part of it, but it's more about how compliant is your infrastructure to your governance framework. So as you can see, I have multiple different policies provisioned and set up, configured for this the multiple environments that I have. And here I can look at those violations. So these are resources that are violating the rules and policies that I defined for my subscriptions. Now, the one I probably want to look at the most is here, security. I have quite a few different violations spread across multiple accounts. So here I can look at the individual violations, and if I want, I can go look at these in more detail. So right before the demo started, I fired up a new S3 bucket and made it publicly available in my AWS account. So here you could see new Acme storage, it's publicly accessible. Well, that violates my policy for this subscription. Now, in this instance, if I were to deploy that S3 bucket using CoreStack, CoreStack would actually stop or enforce the user from deploying that and violating that policy. Since I logged in and deployed this using the AWS console, CoreStack acts like a monitoring agent. So it's recognizing that change. It's going to display that here in the dashboard. And then depending on what I've set up as the action, will depend on what CoreStack does next. So in this particular case, I just have it, all of my policies alerting me in the dashboard. But for something like this, where I see that there's an S3 bucket in this development environment and it's made publicly accessible, most likely in that instance, I would tell CoreStack to automatically take the action of going out and setting the access list to private. So let's do that now. I'll do that inside the dashboard here, ad hoc or manually. So here I can see that this AWS DevOps subscription, I see the new S3 bucket here that's violating my policy or my rule. And here I can take action to go ahead and modify the access list read access. When I hit apply, it's going to make sure, you aware do you know what you're doing? Are you sure you want to do this? And this is where I can come and change the permission. So I'm going to set it to private. Now there's multiple different actions, again, we can do here. We could automate CoreStack to send an email to the user that says you have 24 hours to go out and switch this to private. We could shut it down and then send them an email saying, hey, we had to terminate this resource. It's violating our governance policy, or a mix of those actions. So now you can see for that particular account, I now have no more S3 buckets that are violating this environment. So come here and hit refresh. Here within a few seconds, that violation should be gone, or that bucket will be set to private. So now we can see not public. Now, if I wanted to go look at all the recommendations for all the accounts, that's where I would select recommendations here. And I can look at all the violations for each of the individual accounts. So I can look at all the policies individually. If I wanted to drill down to a specific account, I could come here and select my AWS DevOps account and look at all the policy violations. Same thing with Azure, any of my 4 accounts that I have provisioned. So the third dashboard we're going to look at is now the cost analytics dashboard. So the cost analytics dashboard provides visibility of your overall cloud spend. And we have different filters here, predefined filters that you can use to filter through and pull reports for the different environments. So you look at the overall cost from a tenant base, from a cloud provider, and then drill down into the details of per subscription, as well as look at VPCs, resource group, location, tags. We can also separate this cost or display this cost from a per day standpoint, a per month, or per year. So here I can look at individual tagging groups. For, let's pick this Azure DevOps environment, I can look at my daily cost multiple times a day. So this is today's date, the cost on a per hour basis. I can look at the cost and track it appropriately and set up different filters for. Again, we can look at it via month and year. One of the things worth noting here is if I select this Azure DevOps account, you could see my provisioned, the different provision tags and values that I have set up for this environment. what we find a lot of times is users will follow the guidelines, processes, and policies for provisioning resources and the associated tags for those resources. But what happens a lot of times is the values will end up being disparate. Let me show you what that looks like. So in this AWS subscription I have here, I've defined as a requirement, I want every resource to have a tag of cost center, environment, and name or application owner. So in this particular case, the user that provisioned this workload, this instance, EC2 instance, followed my process, followed our policy of amending or filling out the appropriate tags. However, what happens on the back end is because this tag is env and prod, and it could be written as environment, all lowercase, and production, it makes it very hard to provide visibility as well as bill back um, when you have so many different variables. So one of the ways that we do that or fix this problem is we have a template which I will have scheduled to run multiple times a day, which will actually go out. We have a machine learning engine inside of CoreStack that will learn all of the different tags, try to match that to the defined tags, and then go out and edit those tags appropriately. So if I look at the three instances that I have in this particular subscription, I can see, right, cost center, demo, environ, prod. This third resource actually says environment, but then has product, typo, cost center, demo. And we see this happen with a lot of customers. Actually, one customer we had 5 variables ended up turning into 2,500 different options on the back end. And they had 3 people dedicated to manually going through and editing these tags on a daily basis. It was a huge problem for them from a cost analytics and financial standpoint. So what I'm going to do to show you this use case, I'm just going to run this template ad hoc, just so we don't have to sit and wait for it to run in the next window. But I have this template here that's going to go out and correct those tags and match them to how I set it up in my governance onboarding framework. So I'm going to run this against that AWS_DevOps environment. And within a few seconds here, you'll notice that the tags are actually going to change. Let's see if I hit refresh. There we go. So you can see that that changed what was a typo. Although my users were following our process and policies, all the different variables made it very tricky for me to have good data in order to have visibility to my overall cost. So it went through all 3 resources and changed it to how I want it as a business. I want cost center all lowercase, demo, environment, production, name, etc. So it went out and edited all of those tags. So now when I look at the dashboard, the cost analytics dashboard, I can feel comfortable knowing that, okay, we've done a discovery of all of the data. We've sanitized it and cleaned it up wherever we can. And so now we have as valid data as we can, at least from an automated standpoint. And so now I can actually drill down and start running reports against this environment. Now, from a cost analytics standpoint, we have this dashboard, which is more around overall visibility. We also have reports. So these are default reports that you can run. And again, all of this can be automated and have these reports sent to you in email. You could schedule to have these reports run, sent to you every Monday morning at 8 a.m., for instance. So right now I'm running a report against a particular environment, and I just wanted to look at all orders. So as a team lead, maybe I want to define a report, have it run every Monday, and pull a report for month to date current cost. And we can look at the different export formats depending on what I want to do with that report. So let's just download it in PDF. And here I can, as a project lead, I can see all my users and what they ordered, which environments, and the associated cost if it's in the system. So the fourth area we want to look at for this video is around consumption. Now, consumption can be looked at in two ways. So we have the inventory piece, which we talked about earlier, where operations can manage their infrastructure, spin up new resources or environments or workloads. The next area is around our self-service piece, service brokerage. So here I can look at, right now on this tenant, I have consumers that have two resources spun up. So let's actually log out and I'll log in as a user or developer and show you what the self-service portal looks like. So when the consumer or developer first logs into the environment, they're presented with a dashboard which shows them kind of an overall view of what workloads they currently have running as well as historical data. So from here I can see that I have two active VMs and I can go look at the details of these VMs. So I can see here that I have an Apache web server running on Ubuntu 14.04 and running in AWS or Azure, excuse me. I can look at the instance details as well as I have direct console access into the environment. Same thing for this Python application workload. I could see here that I have all the details. I could see it's up and running. If I wanted to log into that environment, I could log in here. The user credentials and password are presented. I have it set up to automatically generate a password, so you can configure it either way. You could have this particular user, anytime this user spins up an environment, it has a designated password, or it could automatically generate a password for every resource. So that just depends on the operator and how they set up the self-service portal and these workloads. So how does this consumer or user developer order up new environments? So first they would go to the app catalog. Now there's two kind of main methods here. There's the pre-bundled workloads. So these could be pre-configured environments. So if maybe this user was a tester, QA, and every week they spun up the exact same environment and ran through their test cycles. In that case, we would probably want to just define that workload here as a workload, and that user could log in, have access to that single workload, spin it up as needed, and CoreStack would automatically turn it down when the time ran out. Or they could pick and choose. So in this case, for demo purposes, let's pick and choose. So I'm going to choose to provision a new resource using Ubuntu. I'm going to choose AWS. I'm going to choose the environment. Again, what options show up here depend on what's been provisioned or what I'm allowed to have access to as a consumer. I'm going to choose the location, operating system version, VM size. Then I'm going to choose the application or applications. In this case, let's add MongoDB. And here I've set up all my catalog workloads to have a single tier approval. Now there's multiple different ways to set up this approval process. We could allow users to self-approve up to a certain budget or time frame or value. We could allow single tier approval like this, or you could allow two-tier approval. So anything over 30 days and $2,000, we want manager, project lead approval, and we want VP approval. So here I'm defining the requirements. Again, if I were to mistype these, that template would run on the back end to go out and correct that throughout the day. I could have this resource spun up in the future, have it ready for me next Monday morning at 8 a.m., or let's just have it be provisioned now. And in this particular environment, I'm also mandating that the users put in a termination time. Now, this can always be changed. If I were to put in a week here, so let's provision this out till next week. It would automatically be terminated when that time is reached. But between now and then, at any time, I could log in and modify this order. Whatever approval process is required for the start of this order, the user would have to go through the same approval process. So if I came in to modify this order, it would have to get approval before actually being modified on the back end. Here you can also see that I'm being notified of my budget for this particular subscription. So it's letting me know that I have a limit of budget available. So I've got quite a bit of room available. So um, that makes it easier to pick and choose which environments to use. Maybe if this was overrun, I'd say, okay, I'm going to go back and switch this to a different environment, or I'm going to pull it on-prem. Let's deploy this on-prem since we have resources available. So I'm going to place that order. Again, I have this set up for just single tier approval. So what this is going to do is CoreStack's going to email the user that I put in here as the approver. So I'm going to log out and log in as that approver or manager and walk you through the approval process. Now all of this can be offloaded to other tool sets as well. For instance, we have customers that utilize ServiceNow for their ticketing platform and approval and self-service brokerage platform. So in that instance, CoreStack's actually kicking off a task. Uh, the user will log into ServiceNow, the manager approver deny the order. That will kick off an action to CoreStack to go and provision the environment. If any point in time there's a failure during the provisioning, CoreStack will call an API to the ServiceNow um, API, which will then fire up a ticket and alert operations. So here, as an administrator or a project lead, I can see all of the approvals that I've done. So I can see those two existing VMs, and then here I can see that there's a new pending approval. I would also receive an email that lets me know that the ABC developers requested some infrastructure, and that would then prompt me to log into this portal, modify, approve, or reject that order. So for demo purposes, let's just go ahead and approve it. Again, as a project lead or as an approver, they would have the authority to be able to modify this order if the user asks for 2 weeks. But as a project lead, I know that that project needs to be done in one. Why waste the money? Let's go and modify that order. I'll have it terminate in 1 week. So this is now going to kick off the approval process and is going to start the provisioning cycle. And so we'll be able to log back in as a developer, as the user or the requester, and watch that happen. So here as a user, I'm going to be presented again with the same dashboard. I can look at my cloud applications, and then I can actually track the approval process. Now I'll also be notified via email that this approval or that I received approval, as well as when it's done provisioning, I will receive an email as the user that lets me know that the resource is done being provisioned, which should happen here in a few minutes. And then it'll look just like this. It'll provide me with all the details, my credentials, termination time, overall cost. Well, that's it for this video. In summary, we discussed some of the concerns that are driving the conversation around governance. We looked at a demo of how CoreStack can help organizations leverage the benefits of cloud at scale while removing complexities, improving efficiencies, and most importantly, minimizing risk. I can't thank you enough for your time. I hope this video was valuable. We will be releasing follow-up videos that will focus on the technology behind CoreStack as well as specific use cases and pain points that we are seeing in the industry today. Again, my name is Tony Rylands. If you have any questions or want a demo of CoreStack, please reach out to us via our website, corestack.io, or shoot us an email at sales@corestack.io. With that, I say thank you. Until next time.